mauri tū, te mauri noho, te mauri tangata, te mauri atua, te mauri o Ranginui, te mauri o Tangaroa, te mauri o tānei, te mauri o Papatuanuku, te mauri o tū, te mauri o Rongo, te mauri o haumie tiki tiki, te mauri o hine ahu one, kia tau mai te ao, kia tau mai te marama, kia hua mai, mā te katoa, mauri ora.
Mauri ora.
This karakia just invites us to know that we're welcome in this space, to breathe in and breathe out, to connect to our breath, to settle, to stop and to be still. It invites all of that which is our humanity and all that is given to us and belongs to the atua to be in this space with us. And it invites us to be present to those realms that the atua guide us in around food security. Ranginui, Tangaroa, tānei, Papatuanuku, tū, rongo, haumia tiki tiki, hine ahu one. It invites us to have wonder, it invites us into knowing, and it invites all of the fruits that come from us being present in this space to be here with us and for us to be attentive to those things. And we really want to mihi to Āti Tibble, who wrote that karakia especially for Kore Hiakai and especially for those who work in their communities with food, with whānau, bringing food security to others. It was written in the midst of the pandemic and an invitation for us to kind of pull back and really kind of centre ourselves. So we invite you into that space too.
Ka pai tina rā tātou. Ka tautuku au I ngā karakia kua horanei I mua I te raura o tātou katoa. Me aku mihi, kua tāpiri atu ki a koe Tric I tēnei wā nāu I whakatūwhera tō tātou nei huihuinga tāngata. O tērā ki a koutou katoa, kua taia I purangi nei ki Wanganui ki tēnei o ngā kōrero whakahirahira e pāna ki te kai. Ki te Kai Motuhake nau mai, whakatau mai kei Wanganui I a tātou I tēnei o ngā ahiahi. Kua ahiahi nei. Ko ai tēnei, heuri whakaheke no roto mai o te nehe nui o Ngāti Maniapoto, wai katoa no hoki, ki tērā tū wai no te maunga tī tōhia, te maunga hukapapa I tēnei wā tonu, ko Taranaki maunga e tū mai nā, me tōna tapu. Nā reira mai era o ngā kāwai whakapapa tēnei e mihi atu ki a koutou. Kia ora tātou, my name's Trent Hohaya. I'm part of the crew here looking after us today, so as Tricia said, really appreciate your time, appreciate the energy, and am thinking and captured by what might have brought you here today in terms of interest, in terms of alignment, in terms of passion, focus, maybe in terms of concern or care for places and taiao environments that are important to yourself. But whatever has brought you here, all the multitudes of reasons within your reason for coming here, no mai, whakatau mai, please be well amongst us. A couple of things, just little things before I hand back to Trish. If you're comfortable and if it's possible, and if the makeup is still looking good at 1:06 p.m, please encourage you to have the camera on. Just nice to see who we're talking to, although your names are pretty, and some of you do have pretty profile pictures. Amy, I'm looking at you. That's a nice picture of some flowers. If you feel all good, please put the cameras on. But Kei te pai, if not, all good. Ai, ko Trent Hohaya tēnei. I was born in Tāmaki Makaurau several decades ago now. Currently living in Ngāmotu in New Plymouth here in Taranaki. Part of the team looking after us today. Really excited about our kōrero. Where we have, I guess the way we're approaching this is trying to curate a space of learning, of engaging with these concepts of Kai Motuhake, food security, food insecurity, and looking at how shared languaging, shared understanding, and really what our speakers who'll have a bit of time with you later on in this webinar will bring to you. looking at how all those can weave together ultimately to provide support, a bit of fuel, a bit of energy for what's happening now and what can happen in your own takiwa. So really appreciate your time, and I'm looking forward to spending the 90 minutes with you today. Yeah, koira tāku, kei a koe, Trish.
Kia ora, Trent. No ingarangi, ko te rama me hiamani te iwi o ku tūpuna, ko tangata tiratia hau. Kei raro i te maru o kaukau o tari mea ahu mairangi, e noho ana au te whanganui a Tara, te whenua o Taranaki whānui, te pau Ārahi o Kore Hiakai, te mahi o taku nākau, ko Tric Malcolm ahau. So I'm Trish Malcolm, the pau Ārahi of Kore Hiakai, and it's my pleasure and my privilege to be joining you from Te Whanganui a Tara, and I acknowledge that this is the whenua of Taranaki whānui, who's mana whenua in this place. Welcome you on behalf of Kore Hiakai and our team. Behind the scenes, there are people who are helping hold us in from a tech perspective, and that's fantastic, and I want to acknowledge them, particularly Eleanor. But also, Kore Hiakai is about the networks and relationships that we build across the motu, and so I really want to acknowledge our people that have come to share their whakaaro with you today, Pounamu, Steve and Sonya, and the friendship and relationship and sharing of ideas and wisdom and joy that we often have between each other when we're in this space that is when we gather. And I acknowledge all of you who are present here. Some of you we know well, some of you who this might be your first encounter with us, and really want to acknowledge the relationships that you bring us and the wisdom that you bring us in this space. I apologise, I'm a bit croaky today. Yesterday I had almost no voice, so I'm really, really happy that I actually get to hang out with you guys today and get to kōrero with you. And this is the first in our winter webinar series, and we've called it Food Security 101, just really to create a space to explore and as Trent said, kind of feel where we are connected to each other through some of these things. We hope that there's some foundational things in this, and it might build on our subsequent webinars that are happening across the rest of the winter and into the spring. But we recognise the wisdom that you bring. We don't have it all, you bring it, and we join ours with yours. So we just really want to acknowledge that. And it is a privilege to have Trent in here with me to help hold this with his wisdom and his curiosity. That's one of the things I love about Trent, is he asks curious questions and kind of disrupts me and provokes me to think differently. So that's part of why we come together, is so that we can encourage each other to be to our full potential, so that our communities and our people can be at their full potential. I'd like to start, if you haven't already, pop your name in the chat along with whose whenua you are on at this moment, and maybe where you call home. And Trent would love it if you put in an emoji, but I'm happy with a word about how you're feeling at the moment, how you're feeling today. Just also to remind you that the webinar is being recorded, and will be sent back out to you at the end of everything. So that'll be, yeah, just so that you know that that's happening. You probably heard the voice say that we were being recorded right at the beginning. Trent, I think I'm going to hand back to you for a minute, if that's right. Unless you think...
Trish. No, okay, it's fine. I was just figuring out my emoji. Kia ora no tātou. Yeah, so please, if you can, throw your name in the chat, where you are in Aotearoa, if you're joining from outside Aotearoa, and a bit of either an emoji or a word or both, if you want to describe kind of the state you're in at the moment. Helpful to bring those threads together, you know, for us to know, you know, as we know, the world's the world's a tough old place to be right now. And so want to appreciate that people might be coming from different spaces, and all kinds of experience are valid in this space, and ultimately have a relationship into these kaupapa of Kai Motuhake. So just encourage you, although we would love to do whanaungatanga as a whole room, the realities and practicalities of keeping us to time while doing that they just don't quite align. So please throw those in there, and definitely, not that it's a competition, but if you have a unique combination of emojis, I'll definitely take notice. Personally, I can't guarantee anyone else will. Here we our kaupapa for today. So over this next hour and a bit, we're going to take some time to dive deeply into these concepts of food security, Kai Motuhake, food insecurity, what they might mean, and what does that materially or granularly look like here in Aotearoa. To listen to some people who are living that, who are working in this space at varying levels, some fingers in the earth, in the māra, others at orchestration or implementation levels at wider kind of more civic spaces, and obviously with yourselves in the room, who might be bringing, that kind of backyard tikanga of trying to tackle this, the way you're shopping and consuming, all those different attempts at walking this journey of kai sovereignty or kai motuhake. So we're going to be exploring that over an hour together. So I'd like to mihi to Whaia Pounamu and Whaia Sonya, and I'm unsure, is Stephen here at the moment? If you are, Steve, this mihi is also for you, but if not, it's just for you two, Pounamu and Sonya, who are two of our kai kōrero for this afternoon with us. So they'll be sharing a bit of their journey from their perspective and from their location in this mahi of kai sovereignty and of food security. Really important. We want to, where this space is conscious of, you need what you need. So there's an invitation here to take care of yourself over our time together. So if you need to pop out for a break, if you need to grab a drink of water, if you need to flick your your camera off for a little bit, kei te pai, all good. All of those things are welcome. Whatever helps you be here well is what we're keen to name. That is all good in this space. There'll be no. We won't take a break, as in we won't have an intermission that's organised. But if you need to take a break, kai where you just handle it yourself. Also, the webinar is being recorded, as Trish has noted, and will be sent out to everyone who's registered. So if you've registered here, you'll receive an email with that link, and will be made available on the Kore Hiakai YouTube channel. I think that's most of the logistics. If you have pārtai, please put them into the chat. So if as our speakers are speaking, or if you have questions as we're discussing different concepts, put them in the chat if you can. We'll do our best to get to them and weave them in well. If we don't get to them during this webinar, we'll follow up with them. We'll look to follow up with them as best as we can in the email that follows. We'll also be asking you some questions throughout. So there's a bit of work for all of us in here, I guess. They'll be recorded in the transcript. I will go through that and may follow up with you in order to have your wisdom continue to inform this kōrero. But in there is the invitation. One of the phrases I really like is look to the wisdom in the room. Often we can externalize answers to places beyond ourselves, but often it's through relationships with people who are occupy the same space as you that a lot of the answers can be found. So welcome your contributions and comments and things in the chat as well. All of your responses to questions won't be shared unless they are anonymized. So it would be unable to identify a person based on their response. Or we check with you first, should you provide an answer or provide some kōrero. Those won't be used without anonymity or without a check-in with yourself. Ka pai. Over to you, Trish.
Well, right now we invite you to slow your rhythm down a bit and enjoy this time together. We're going to begin with a little bit of a pause, an opportunity for you to do some imagining, because it's often when we're in that imagining space and that we pay attention to the listening of our whole tinana that the wisdom comes. So we just want to begin in that. So just take a moment to breathe in and to breathe out. If you feel like it, you might want to close your eyes, or if you're watching and listening to this webinar while doing something else, you might just want to pause and put your pen down or take your fingers off your keyboard for a moment and just listen to your breath as it goes in and goes out. Within you, I ask you to find yourself in a place in Aotearoa or in your homeland that feels like home to you? Where are you? What is around you? What might that place be like if you knew within your whole being that it was food secure? In that place, find yourself as a bird, a manu, with the ability to take flight. See things from that bird's eye view. Look around. What do you see? Who can you see? What kind of things are present in the landscape? What can you smell? What sounds can you hear? Wild sounds? Human sounds? The sounds of the ngahere? What can you touch? What can you feel on your skin? What colours are here? What emotions are bubbling up within you? From this place, take flight. Fly over where you are. What else can you notice? What landscape features can you see? As you gain height, continue to fly over all other parts of Aotearoa. What is going on in those other places? What can you see? What can you smell? What can you hear? What colours are there? What landscapes and cityscapes and townscapes do you see? As you travel through our Food Secure motu, find a place to rest and be content. Ha ki roto, ha ki waho. Breathe in and breathe out as we continue on this journey this afternoon.
Tēnā no koutou. Tēnā koe Tric I tō whakatau I a tātou I tēnei I te rau o ngā ritinga. Mihi atu anō ki a koutou. Firstly, for the quality emojis in the chat. Secondly, for your presence again. Often, if you join up to a webinar or click a link to register for things, you can. I'm familiar with various thoughts kind of hitting me, like, oh, what if I don't know anyone? What if I'm the least informed person in the room about the kaupapa? And so maybe as a bit of a koha to you all, I'm happy to take the least informed crown from anyone else who thinks they might have it. As a facilitator, I'm pretty new to this Kai Motuhake space. Although some of the concepts are familiar from kaupapa, āhapu, āiwi, āwhānau, definitely the scale, scope, breadth, depth of these things is a new world. And so in that, I think I'm naming that in the pursuit of comfortability with not knowing, valuing learning over knowing, valuing the process over the destination. Which leads me to our first question for us as a group today. So I think Eleanor's going to chuck this into the chat. But we'll be really keen to read from yourselves. What does food security mean to you? So take some time to reflect. Write down your answers in the chat if you can, if you feel inclined. What does food security mean to you in your context, in your whānau, in your organization, wherever you might be working? And it's my absolute privilege to welcome our first kai kōrero to tackle not to tackle, but to engage with our wānanga today and introduce themselves via Pounamu. No mai. Awesome to have you here. For those who are who are familiar with Taranaki, you'll know that Whai Pounamu is like pretty much the go-to person when you're talking māra kai here. I'm trying not to look at her screen because I'll get the eyes to not say this stuff. Um, but absolutely incredibly well respected, and I know respected far beyond our takiwa. But really, yeah, welcome to you, Whai. Really, really looking forward to hearing your kōrero. Would love to hear a little bit about you, your context, where you're from, and then also, once we've heard a bit about you as who you are yourself, getting into those questions around your approach to Kai Motuhake, food security, insecurity, what your vision in that kind of world. But would just love to get to know you a little bit first. Tēnā koe whai.
Tēnā koe, Trent. Me koutou. Te rā puanga ka rewa te pai. Nau mai, hara mai, te ua o te tauhou. Nō reira, e mihi ana ki a koutou katoa, mo tēnei ahi. Thank you for the warm welcome, and lovely that you are all here this afternoon to share and to learn and to really connect. I see lots of cool people here that are working in this space, and I just want to mihi to you. It's not an easy space. It's not that well paid in this space, but yet most people I know who work in Kai usually have big hearts that want to share it with their community. So e mihi ana. So I come from the lofty mountain on the west coast of Taranaki. We are blessed with lots of fresh water that runs down. Many of those are my awa. My people have landed in the north, in the lands of Te Āti Awa. And then we cruised around the coast to the Taranaki Tūturu and then ventured a little bit further into Ngāti Ruanui. I also have a licorice all sort, so some flavours in Ngāti Raukawa ki te Tonga, a small place called Oho, tu korehi hapu, tu korehi marae. Yeah. And I'm very fortunate to reside in Ōnairo in the north on our Papakāinga called Te Rau o Rongo. So I've been in this space for a long time, I think. It feels like it's been a while. And really, my story was I used to be a body worker, so midi. I used to midi our people, our whānau around the maunga, and then had a moment one day and thought, I'm not making enough impact doing this work one-on-one. And so literally just shifted to midi, hini ahu oni is how I look at it, to midi the soil. And with that, we as gardeners, I mean, I do come from a long line of gardeners like many of us here, where that was what we ate as children. Fond memories of my grandmother's garden, running around, eating the peas, smelling the sweet peas, the flowers, and being brought up on fresh bread and tomato sandwiches straight from the maara. So it's been part of my upbringing, and I guess I've always grown food. I was a single mum, so to have really good quality food was important to me. I wanted to feed my firstborn kumara as her first solids. And so I had to learn how to grow kumara. So she was a good challenge because she had lots of allergies. And so yeah, it really helped me on my journey to get started. Now, I chose to not have spend a lot of money setting up gardens. And I'd go to the secondhand shops and buy like a suitcase, whatever could hold soil, and then I'd just start. So I'm really of the belief that actually, if you have the desire, then you can make it happen out of a small putia. From there, I get into mischief when I've got a bit of time, and usually it's in this season of puanga when it's a little bit of a downtime, a bit more time and space. And so I wrote this program called Tātai Tāngata ki te whenua, and it's a māra kai program for our whānau in here in Taranaki, and I think it's been going 4 seasons now of teaching whānau Māori how to grow food at home. And there's been like probably over 400 households that are now growing their own gardens. And I don't say that to Skype, but I say that because that, for me, that is motuhake. That is giving our whānau the tools so that they have got some food that they can go to every day and A, be a kaitiaki, and B, have something to pick so they can bring it inside to eat. So my work is very much about some days it's about empowering whānau to grow food. Other days it's more about strategy, about how we can lift ourselves out of the place we're in now. Because that beautiful meditation vision, as you go across your landscapes, for me, it doesn't actually look like food security here. Taranaki's obsessed with monocultural of growing grass for cows that then costs us a heap of money, $10 to buy a butter. That's definitely not security. So the visions for me is to create new opportunities, to create new trade amongst ourselves so that everybody has access to affordable and nutritional kai. Yeah. So I'll just finish off now because I don't like taking up too much space. What else do I do in the space? I work with our iwi, so currently through the gardening programs. So just a little encouragement if you're sitting there in your own takiwa to really, we've got a blueprint now. I've been with 3 iwis teaching gardening for 4 years, so it's definitely possible. And then we're also moving into the rongo space. Yeah. So, nō reire te whānau. We'll talk to you again soon. Tēnā koutou.
Nā mihi Pounamu I rangatira. Always so rich to listen to you just talk about your normal. Your normal feels amazing. It feels expansive and it feels so grounded. So ngā mihi nui. I love the brought up on fresh bread and tomato sandwiches. For me, that was a real nostalgia moment. I was like, oh. I came from a home where my mama made all of our bread, and so that kind of freshness of all of those things, yum. Love the way that you just hold your people and the way you tell those stories too. The 400 households and how excited you got as you mentioned that your whole face kind of was in love with it, and that just real sense of that being Kai Motuhake, that households have the ability to use their kaitiaki as well as to find to eat. So that role of actually being the carer of and then the person who's responsible for is just as important for our wairua as it is the kai that we put in our mouths. So I love how you weave those things together. Thank you for sharing your vision about the need to have opportunities to restore Kai Motuhake, your vision of a landscape that you flew over that could be not that by its monocultural farming, what it would look like restored to a way that would be that, a Kai Motuhake landscape. Really, really beautiful. Ngā mihi. We're just going to do a little flip because we still struggling to pull Steve into the room. And so I'm just going to give Sonya a wee moment so that she can feel like she's got enough time to be ready for us to throw the rako to her. It is my privilege to invite Sonya into this space. Many people may know her from the various roles that she has had over time, including a time that she spent as part of Kore Hiakai as a kaimahi, and the work that she did in particularly one of our publications called Realising Food Secure Communities in Āti Awa. Sonya now sits with the Salvation Army in a national role, and it's our privilege to welcome you, Sonya, into the room to share what it is that you do and what your whakaaro is.
Sure. Kia ora and welcome. I mean, it's really lovely to be here, and I feel sort of slightly intimidated, I have to say, to be following somebody as amazing as Pounamu. Tēnā koutou katoa, no tauranga tuku whānau e nai anei, kei te whanganui atara ahau e noho ana. Ko Sonya Cameron tuku ingoa, he kai hautu te Kai Mākona ahau e te Ope Whakaora. So kia ora everyone, my name's Sonya Cameron. I'm from Tauranga, but live in a beautiful Wellington, and I'm the Food Security Manager at Salvation Army. So, I mean, as Trish said, I actually sort of initially started at Kore Hiakai very briefly in 2019, and what had actually happened is I was working at MSD at the time, and I saw a little line in a paper, something about various organisations, including Salvation Army, who were wanting to dig deeper into understanding the issue of food insecurity and food security by setting up an organisation called Kore Hiakai. And I said to my boss at the time that looked interesting, and did they need any help? And next thing you know, it was late 2019, and I ended up on secondment working at Kore Hiakai, which was really fortuitous because 3 months later I was back at MSD when COVID hit, and food security or food insecurity and was on the top of everyone's minds as all our food banks across the country were running out of kai, and you know, we were sort of looking as government at how to respond to that. So at that point, I helped establish the Food Secure Communities program and led that for a few years over those kind of COVID years. I have to say, it was quite a revelation to me to discover food security, and I just kind of felt at that stage like I kind of had finally found the thing that really aligned with everything that was about me. So I've always loved, growing and cooking and preserving and sharing kai. I've got chickens and fruit trees. I've just recently been involved with establishing a little Pātaka kai in my community. But I also love all of that stuff around our bigger food systems, whether that be the environmental aspects of it, the economic, the social, and looking at how we advocate to strengthen our food systems. Just recently, I've actually been talking with Tric about maybe we need a board game around helping to understand and strengthen our food systems. My role at Salvation Army is really around supporting our 70 or so food banks that are from Kaitaia to Invercargill. Really making sure they've got enough food and funding is kind of a lot of the day-to-day mahi I have. Recently it's been conversations around home kill and recreational meat, for example, but also leading Te Kai Mākona, which is our food security framework. So Sally's adopted Te Kai Mākona in 2022, and our vision is that we are places of support and connection that strengthen food security for whānau and communities. Obviously, working with our food banks, it's with people really that are in the space of food insecurity. But, our feeling that is if we want to support, if we want to realise our vision, it's kind of like, how do we support whānau and communities to become food secure? So we've got a goal for Te Kai Mākona that by 2030 that people in whānau will no longer rely on our food banks. Te Kai Mākona has a set of values we operate under. It includes aroha, choice, agency, whanaungatanga, manaakitanga, collaboration and sustainability. And we've got 3 pillars. So that includes strengthening how we support those experiencing hardship, fostering food empowerment and strengthening food security, and addressing root causes of food insecurity. And we've seen some major shifts across the motu in recent years, particularly with that first pillar. So our food banks are now generally offering choice as a norm, either through shopping style food banks or through sort of what we're calling tick and collect models. And these have been working really well, both for the whānau we support, but also for our kaimahi. We've also shifted away from people needing to prove need for food, and we're doing our best to support whānau with the resources we have. Obviously, we all know that Kai's been a bit stretched in recent times. But we might do that through agreeing on Kai plans with whānau for periods of time. More recently, Trish, do you want me to sort of just go into sort of some of the food ladder stuff, or should we come to that later?
Totally up to you now.
Okay, yeah, I'll just keep going then. So recently we've made a pivot with Te Kai Mākona, and I'm really hopeful that it will help us to achieving our dream of strengthening food security in our communities. So we'd found that with the second pillar for Te Kai Mākona, that it might have been that we had things like cooking classes or community gardens, but that this didn't necessarily mean that it was that we were supporting whānau to become food secure. So in our centres, we're talking about a lot of the complex needs for the whānau they were supporting, which might include, mental health and homelessness and more. So then we came across this food ladders framework from the UK, which we've now incorporated into Te Kai Mākona, and it's really going to be the focus of our mahi over the next year and probably more. So this is a framework that's in broad use across the UK, and it imagines the community food system as a ladder made up of 3 connected rungs, with each rung representing a different kind of activity. And so the first rung is around catching and caring for people, and it's really around that emergency support. So that might be food banks. It also might include other models such as free stores, etc. But through the food ladders, it's also recognising that there's a whole lot of things that are kind of outside of that people in whānau that we're working with, that they need to become food secure. It's around a variety of resources that are required. So that could be financial knowledge, social connection, having sufficient time, physical and mental health, or access to place-based infrastructure and resources. And that could be everything from living close enough to a supermarket, or it could be a kitchen or a garden, or it could be, the local fisheries, as I was sort of dreaming, with our earlier exercise. So second rung is around capability building, and that's done with people. And that might include activities such as gardening or cooking or nutrition, but it might also include support in other areas such as housing or financial or employment, cultural identity, mental health, etc. Food Ladders also recognises that our food systems systematically disadvantage certain groups in our society and make it much more difficult for us to become food secure. So the third rung of the ladder is around community-led activity aimed at strengthening our food systems and making good food more accessible to everyone. So the examples might include food co-ops, and we're working on one called the Community Grocer. Might be community growing spaces, but also advocacy on local issues. So people can be at different parts of the food ladder and can move up and down. and no organisation will necessarily provide the whole ladder. The most important thing within a community is around making sure that there's a range of opportunities and supports so that everyone in the community can become food secure, and that they have the relationships in place to connect people with the support they need.
That's me.
Tēnā koe, Sonya. Ngā mihi mō kōrero kua hora nei. I think, there's so much to pick from in that. I think the thing that's resonating with me is that, as Te Kai Mākona is exploring generating these solutions for what whānau are experiencing across Aotearoa, you're encountering so many related, connected issues or realities that I'm sure people in the room will know are realities our whānau are facing across Aotearoa. And what the shift that engaging with these concepts is causing in how to even conceptualize solving those same problems. I think that's the iterative nature of, as we're working, we're learning, as we're engaging with whānau, it's shifting the way we work. There's a self-iterating element to it that I think feels really accessible and feels almost has a natural feeling, as in an ecosystem flavor to it, and in how it's moving. Also really important, I think, to see that organizational, as in the work of organizing, the structural element of what does this look nationally, as we're also seeing in the chat, I think what we're seeing as I'm reading through the chat, we're seeing people describe various states of abundance, and also methods, tools to secure and protect that abundance from attitudes, processes that might serve to undercut it. And I think that naming of the scope of this and hearing the desires of those of you in the room for that state of abundance to be shared amongst all people, and the collective controls that might be required, all of that is such a, I imagine there just must be rabbit holes for days you could go down to in exploring how to tackle this stuff. So I appreciate bringing that wisdom to the room. It looks like we don't yet have Steve, no matter the miracles of Zoom communication. So we'll shift on Āti Iwi, and we'll, if Steve is able to get into the room, we'll give him a bit of space later on to have a kōrero. But tēnā kōrua, Pounamu kōrua ko Sonya. Yeah, really appreciate the time you spent to ground our room in a bit of experience and a bit of lived praxis around this kind of stuff, from the māra to the organizational table. Tric, I know Kore Hiakai have wrestled with these same concepts and have grown insights and found insights in both the work and the relationships developed throughout the work about this idea of Kai Motuhake, food security, food insecurity. Could we hear from yourself around maybe that journey for Kore Hiakai, and what are the learnings you've unearthed that have you found to be really valuable in this work?
Hey, tēnā koe. Trent, for us, our vision starts with kind of in two places. We talk about shining a light on the root cause of food-related poverty and collaborating with others towards a food secure Aotearoa, and that kind of has meant that we've had to explore and unravel what both of those two things mean, and what they mean in partnership with each other, that it's not just that one state, it's about more than one state in existence with each other. And one of the things in that space is to make the admission that when we talk about food security, we're not just talking about food, we're actually talking about everything that kind of wraps around that and holds that in place amongst our whānau and amongst our communities. And quite often the inability to have food and food security is more about an equity issue than it is about, does food exist? And that food insecurity becomes the symptom of something bigger and deeper. It's about our economic framework, it's about the causes of poverty, it's about the effects of colonisation, And so that has to be present with us as we tackle all of these things. Kore Hiakai has been really privileged to be gifted its name, and it comes from a wider piece of kōrero, which goes e kore, hiakai, which means there will never ever be hunger for our people. And it's really a statement of a vision and a dream and a place that we know we can get to. It calls us to a place of abundance. You mentioned abundance before, instead of a place of scarcity, that we know that there is enough and we know that we are enough, and enough is something good, not just something sparse. Abundance might feel a little hard at times, like we're at in our history right at this moment, but we have to remember that there is enough here in Aotearoa for us to not just feed each other but thrive with each other. That is really important. Yeah. Kore Hiakai also, if you think about our name, Kore Hiakai Zero Hunger Collective, we use the word zero hunger because that links us to the United Nations frameworks, including the UN Sustainable Development Goal number 2, which is zero hunger. And we're going to put some of these words up so that you have the chance to, when you get the recording, go back to them if you want to, and you can have an allergic reaction to any of them. We're good with that. This is a chance to kind of explore what is our whakaora around all of these things. One of the things I love about the UN definition, and I know some people not so comfortable with food security and want to move quickly to another space, but one of the things the UN have done is it's woven in lots of different voices, including Indigenous voices, to come to a place that means that they can offer some frameworks, and there's some really good resources. Go dig in their website, go dig around what their definitions are and some of their long reports. If you're a bit geeky and like to read a lot, then there's some very geeky reports you can read in that space. But one of the things they offer is a series of lenses to look through, and they are availability, access, stability, utilization, agency, and sustainability. And I'm not going to dive into them now. I'll let you go and have a bit of a dive into that stuff in your own time. They're a bit policy wonky in terms of their wording, but I promise that when you undo them, when you dig beneath them, there's a lot of goodness in there. We try and look through those lenses, but we often just have a phrase that we've summarized off the UN food security framework, and that is all people at all times have agency and hang on, Eleanor, I'm going to go through them slowly. All people at all times have agency and access to enough good food to thrive. So if you do that slow, and I usually use my fingers to do it. So all people, what does all people mean? Trent, what do you think all people might mean?
As the defined newbie, I'm going to say it means everyone.
Not some people, but all people. Yeah. So the next one's all of the time. So all people at all times, which again isn't some, it's all. And so not some of the time, but all of the time. So the next one is have agency, which is the ability to choose, to self-determine, and access. It's not about overindulgence. Access is, it's when we think about access to food, that's not just physical access, it's often economic access. So that's really important to see both those things. It's not just a one thing. And then enough. I love this word. I think as a child it was used in the negative space, but I just love that it can be such a positive thing for us. It's not about overindulgence. It is about abundance. It's not about scarcity. It is enough so that we are not just not left hungry, but that we can be all that we're meant to be. So enough, good. I sometimes have an allergic reaction to the word good because I was told a lot as a child to be a good girl, which usually meant stop playing in the trees and things like that. But this sense of good is everything that makes us healthy and whole, everything that nourishes our bodies and our whenua. It means that we're capable of receiving the nutrients from our food. As Pounamu mentioned earlier, the complexities of managing allergies, and I'm one of those people. You can put food out for me and it's not good for me. So good means that our bodies and our wairua are sustained. And then food. And that one might seem obvious, but food is more than just the commodity that it is. And even in our particular time in history, sometimes I think we can really question what it is that we put in our mouths and whether that actually is food. Is there any nutritional value in it, or is it a consumable rather than a food? But also food is that thing that connects us. It helps us to build relationship and community, and so to remember that bit as well. And then the last piece of that phrase is to thrive, not just to survive, but to thrive, to be all that we have in our potential as humans, all that we have in terms of our potential as communities, all that we have in our potential as our planet. So all people at all times have agency and access to enough good food to thrive. What does good and thriving mean to you, Trent?
Yeah, Trish. Yeah. As I've been listening, I think some of these concepts you can run away from you, and so I'm trying to think, oh, what does this look like at home? What might thriving look like? And weirdly enough, like I'm reading definitions of food security, and I'm seeing these themes of abundance over scarcity. So there's enough. We're thriving in terms of the amount of kai, like a requisite amount for people to live healthy lives. There's elements of thriving looking like growing your own kai, being involved in the production, even though production kind of feels like a dirty word, in the growing of your kai. Dignity and access. That access to kai isn't, it doesn't suffer from shame, and that perhaps as a secondary or as a fruit of those states, we've got this idea of connection, which you touched on yourself, Trish, there. So I think for me, those elements are, I'm hearing those in that concept of thriving. And probably the other thing, just to touch on for a second, is I'm thinking about, like for Pounamu, you said, and it's just been in my ear since you said it. Like in Taranaki, we've got an obsession with grass, and I think if you think of those who are around for this will know better than myself, but when seatbelts were introduced in Aotearoa, there was opposition to the idea of mandatory seatbelts. It was a concept that couldn't be engaged with by a large number of our population. Yet today it's part of our society and barely ever questioned. Probably more fundamentally important ones. Same-sex marriage was a similar. There were certain generations for those generations, it was inconceivable. It was an impossibility. And then for the generations we've got now, it's not a questioned reality that you would have that legal right to marry someone of the same sex or same gender. And so I'm thinking about this idea of thriving and this obsession with grass that we've got here at home. And I'm thinking thriving must look like the old obsessions being let go of or being allowed to rot away and feed back into the tire, and these new ideas of being obsessed with bounty amongst all of us being a new definition of thriving, and that as we grow, so too must our definitions for these things change. So I think that's where I'm at least at the moment, with thriving. But again, like our first question, Tefana, would love to hear from yourselves. So we've got our working definitions of what kai security, food security looks like, and we've described various states in there around plenty, abundance. The next question for us all, please, loving your answers in the chat, please keep them coming for this partai. What does thriving mean for you? What does thriving mean? So if you were to describe a thriving state in relation to kai sovereignty, Kai Motuhake, food security, what does that mean? What are the pictures that come up in your minds? What are the thoughts? Any experiences, if you've ever seen it? If you've ever felt it, maybe in a moment or in a period or in a season. Awesome. Thank you, Eleanor. So what does thriving mean to you? And just as you're writing those up, so you've got a bit of time on your keyboards, yes, you perhaps you've encountered this before. Often you can come to hui trying to talk about the same thing, and you realize there are 20 seats around the table, and there are 20 definitions of what the subject you're talking about. And sometimes that can add real richness, because you can, if you've got ears to listen, you can hear different perspectives. But sometimes those definitions can appear to clash, or perhaps there's not the temperament around the table to engage meaningfully with the various definitions. And so part of this webinar is not so much getting on the same page as in having an exclusive definition of any of these things, but getting closer towards a shared languaging to be able to have good conversations with each other about this stuff. That food security, that when we're speaking, when we're talking about these concepts, that our definitions serve to bring us closer together, not further apart. Oh, that's more organizational work. I'm not into that. That's not really what food sovereignty is. Or, oh, that's gardening. I'm not really into that. I'm more into the policy, whatever side you might be into. All of those approaches are valid, but the function of this language is to help us have better conversations. And so, in that, one of the concepts that we'll come across are awesome. Thank you. Oh, beautiful to see some answers coming in. This concept of Kai Motuhake. We could spend a whole webinar just talking about these two kupu, so we won't. We definitely won't spend this one doing it. But this idea of motuhaketanga, or something being, so people might have heard the phrase Kai Motuhake or mana motuhake, and thought it would be valuable to spend a bit of time there for a second. A friend of a friend was working once in, I believe it was the Cherokee Nation in America. And in America, the Native American nations, they have their own parliaments, their own systems of governance and government in their own tribal territories. And this friend of a friend was working over there for a period of time. And people, when they returned to Aotearoa, they asked them, oh, what are their systems and how do they do it, and what can we bring over here? And we kind of expected to hear, oh, this is the framework you should use, or this is the approach you should use. But actually what they ended up talking to more so wasn't that they had any silver bullet in terms of, oh, this is their program structure, this is their funding structure, this is their government structure. The silver bullet for them was, within that tribal nation, no one questioned the reality that they should be able to govern themselves. So the idea that they had this concept of mana motuhake, or of absolute authority, which is what mana motuhake most closely translates to, even though it's not a full encapsulation. This idea just wasn't questioned, right from babies all the way to their grandparents. No one questioned that they should have a say in how their own affairs are managed. And this person said that's what really struck them. Wasn't that their systems were perfect or they had all the answers. It was that it was unquestioned in the minds of the people. And part of me thinks, when we use this idea of Kai Motuhake, or what that could look like for our people, how it relates to concepts like thriving, part of me thinks the win won't just be when everyone's cupboards are full, although that'll be an incredible thing to celebrate. But when the idea that we should prioritize cupboards being full over other lesser priorities, of which I'm sure you all could name some in your own communities, when that fundamental shift happens in us as people, that's what thriving could look like, or one form of thriving for us. So that's a little bit of a dive into that kupu of motuhake. This idea of Kai Motuhake is absolute engagement relationship from start to finish with your kai, with the environment that grows our kai, with the environment that grows us. That idea of motuhaketanga is that unquestionability, of that. Of course, that's what the relationship our people should have with their food. That, like I often ask our friends when we're in wānanga, what do you think of the things that that future generations will look back on us as being crazy for having lived by? And one of my nieces said, "Oh, supermarkets. I reckon they'll look back at us and go, that's crazy. How did you ever let that be your food system?" I was thinking, yeah, maybe one day we'll have to describe where we had these big warehouses and they had all the food that everyone grew locally, but we put it there and then we paid, whatever, as a little demonstration of the imagination of my niece. So important to contextualize these concepts and make sure we have a shared understanding. So that idea of motuhaketanga is absolute relationship and connection, absolute unquestioning mentality around our relationship with our kai. Beautiful to see more definitions of thriving coming through. Awesome. Thank you so much. Kei a koe, Trish.
Tēnā koe, Trent. Your wisdom is wonderful to sit and just soak in. I'm mindful of time and that we want to get back to our wonderful guests in this space, but we have a couple more slides that kind of jump through what Trent was just talking about. So I just think I'll let Eleanor kind of slowly flow us through them. There's an international Indigenous movement around food sovereignty. Sorry, could tremble over my words. And so again, I invite you to go look at this, but this kind of brings us into that space that Trent has just so beautifully articulated about motuhake and motuhaketanga. This is motuhaketanga from a group of people, different Indigenous peoples who've met and wrestled with this on the global scale. And when we pull that into Aotearoa, we've often talked about Māori kai sovereignty. And that's very alive and legitimate. But Kore Hiakai, when we were working with that, we realised there is often a disconnect that when we use kupu Māori with kupu Pākehā, when we use English words for some things and slot them alongside a Māori word, we kind of don't allow the whole of the Māori concept to be present. And so when we searched for something to articulate that for ourselves, we decided to land on the language of Kai Motuhake, and that's being so beautifully articulated by Trent in that way. We were going to pause into a little bit around food insecurity, but only just for a little bit, and to say, it's important to remember that we currently exist in a state that holds some kai motuhake, some food security, but still holds food insecurity. It's important to know that the work that we do to feed the people who are hungry now is really important, and it sits alongside the work that we have to do both in our communities but at structural levels around moving towards food security and food insecurity. So Eleanor, I just invite you to throw the food insecurity slide up there so that when people come back they can find those words. For us in Kore Hiakai, we truly believe that in Aotearoa, the way that we move from food insecurity to food security and to kai motuhake is to walk through te tiriti o Waitangi and te ao Māori. It's looking to our local wisdom, but it's doing that in partnership with a te ao Māori way of thinking, but also the relationships that Māori bring up in those spaces for us to know. Pounamu, again, your beautiful vision of the grass landscape versus what could be, what was, and what shall be again. Kai Motuhake invites us to sit in those places of looking for re-indigenisation at the same time as doing our decolonisation. And it's through that journey, in our local journeys and in our commitment to being connected to each other and relationship, that we can actually move out of a place of scarcity and into a place of permanent, unassumed abundance, that motuhake that Trent so beautifully shared. So I'm going to hand back to Trent, and Trent's going to invite our people back into the room to have a bit of a chat for the remainder of our time. If you do have any partai, any questions at this point, please pop them in the chat if you want to ask anyone a specific question, and we'll see if we can get to them, and if we can't, then we'll see if we can broker that conversation on the other side of this webinar. I hand back to you, Trent.
Tēnā koe, Trish. Tēnā tātou. Awesome. So we're going to bring Whai Pounamu and Sonya back into the kōrero here. So this is not an opportunity. If you've got questions or maybe concepts that are bubbling in your mind, just spend a bit of time to sift through those and chuck them in the chat. Once you kind of get a bit of, can sink your teeth into them. And probably just for yourselves, Pounamu and Sonya, probably looking for, what do these conversations, what do they elicit in you? I'm thinking of questions like, with the experiences you both have, what are the things you think, what comes to mind when you think things like, okay, if people take away anything from my experience in this journey of Kai Motuhake or food security, these are the ideas I want to share with people. So if there's anything coming up for you in regard to that, or any thoughts on what Trish has also just finished sharing around the Aotearoa context and the weaving of these concepts that originate in different worlds. Any whakaaro popping up for yourselves at the moment, Kei Ākorua?
Kia ora. So I guess what was coming up for me was, it's a philosophical difference about how we view whenua or land. And and when we, oh my gosh, sorry. Just got to turn that's my sister ringing. Okay. So when we view whenua as an economic way to make money, which is what the current food system does, then it changes kind of the outcome, and we've got it, like I live around a lot of dairy farming. Oh gosh, she's good. And therefore there's no biodiversity. So in any natural system, like if we look in a Ngāhere forest, there's going to be lots of variety of trees, which creates a very deep soil mass, which creates abundance. So in the kōrero earlier, we talked about living abundantly, having enough healthy kai, nutritional kai for our people. So the current system of dairy farming is not going to work long term. Eventually that means that we haven't got enough diversity going on. And so I love that there's small food producers in our rohi anyway that are creating food variety, a lot of different food coming through in Taranaki. The other thing it brings up is actually gardeners aren't paid, and there's still a bias against gardeners. Like I've been told, oh, that's just a hobby. What are you on about? And there's a disconnect from what you pick up in the supermarket and put on your plate at night, and where the whakapapa of where the kai comes from. So I always ask the question to my students, to our whānau, on your plate at night, how much of that food's come from your own? Do you know the whakapapa of that food? That you might know the hands that created it, made it, cooked it. And, in the beginning of their gardening journey, it's usually nothing on your plates come from their own garden or from a local gardener in their region. So I like to keep it really simple because sometimes it becomes overwhelming about how much lack we have, where actually we can control some things. We can control the way that we think, and we can control our actions. And I sort of pride myself now in being someone that puts the thinking into action. Because I did years of working nationally about talking about food security, food sovereignty. And then the last 8 years I've come home and actually started to do it with our people. And what I've found is nobody grew much kumara before, and now lots and lots of whānau are growing kumara. And so I know there's a shift, and hopefully I've been part of that ripple effect. And I think it's just the beginning to shifting what's on our plate, that we know the whakapapa of where that kai comes from.
Kia koe, Sonya.
I was going to say, I was thinking, through some of this kōrero about, I was involved with a crop swap in my community for quite some time, and I remember there at one point somebody brought along some kamo seeds. And, with the crop swap, it's just, once a month. And so anyway, people took home those kamo seeds, and then a few months later, coming back with little seedlings, and those are shared. And then a few months later, it's the actual kamo. And again, those are shared. And by this stage, you've gone from a seed to quite a few kamo, a lot of people with those kamo. And then later, they're kind of almost like pumpkins. And, we were still trying to eat them. Not so nice now. But also, it's kind of coming back to those seeds. And now there's a lot of seeds for sharing. And I felt like that was just a real nice way of sort of experiencing food as abundance. And yeah. And I was also reflecting about, we've talked a lot about butter. I mean, like both here today, but, I think just generally. And I think, we're in the space of butter as scarcity, like it's basically one company that is controlling our access to butter, and they're sending 90%, 95% of that butter overseas. It could actually be that instead of one company controlling that butter, that everyone, or anyone could actually be producing butter and deciding to make that available, to their local community. And if we're thinking about all that grassland, again, if in our local communities we could have, farmers who were, looking at how they support their own communities, again, rather than sort of our food needing to go through our supermarkets. And again, this sort of two companies in this case who are kind of controlling our access to kai. I think that we could be looking at how do we make our food system so that they support our local people, so that it's local businesses, local food producers, and and our local gardeners, as Pounamu was saying. It doesn't take one decent sized garden can actually feed a lot more than than one field.
Tēnā kōrua. Yeah, fantastic to listen. A couple of questions in the chat. So first one from, oh God, I'll just scroll past it. Oh, from Sharon Williams. For any funders or people with connections to funders, why can there not be more of a focus on funding this kind of mahi that you're describing? When the huge value to communities is known, the volunteer hours, the community connection, or the perhaps more intangible or less hard to track positive aspects of this work. I do a bit of work, so I'll if there are any other connections amongst yourselves, Pounamu, Sonya or Trish, I do a bit of work with funders across the board, across Aotearoa and a little bit internationally as well. Although this I can't answer this exact question, there's a bit of a theory that pops up in my head. So one thing is you'll hear funders talk about accountability measures, and what they mean is reporting. And when they mean reporting, what they mean is where's the value of our dollar being spent, and one of the logics that world operates, if we continue on from Pounamu's kōrero on that philosophical approach towards whenua. One of the philosophical approaches of current charity funding is we want to make sure we're spending dollars the right way, and to know that we have to be able to track it. And if we can't track it, then essentially we don't know the impact of our dollar. And so things like community well-being that are hard to evidence don't lend themselves well to funding. Having said that, I know there are funders who have produced things who have funded kaupapa like these. But I think one of the things is risk aversion, or it can be difficult to track the outcomes. When I say track, I mean track on a spreadsheet. I don't mean track as in see them evidence in our communities. So that's one of the barriers. Any responses from yourselves on that?
I was going to say, Trent, that I found it really interesting at the moment that, the government's talking about wanting to get a third grocery player, and, they're seem to be putting huge amounts of resources into that. And, at the same time, MSD has had that little Food Secure Communities grants, $1.5 million. And what MSD's trying to do is actually not presumably dissimilar. It's around how do we make sure that our communities have got access to affordable food. But just imagine if the resources and the focus that the government's putting into, trying to get Costco or Aldi here could actually be put into making sure that our communities had enough access to affordable food, through the kind of work that's being done by, a lot of the people that are on the call here.
You're a Sonya.
Um,
I
2 cents worth. Like, actually, if funders could see the value of funding gardeners, we would see a different landscape. For some reason, there needs to be a shift, just an attitude towards that gardening shouldn't be for free, that actually community gardens should be funded, and not just for stuff, but for expertise and people. So that's if there's any funders on the call, please, just think about your policies, and that funding people is really important. People make stuff happen. Yeah, not the stuff, not the resource, but the people.
Tēnā kōrua. There's also, actually just on that, there's another question in here from Monica. Apologies if I pronounce your last name wrong, Monica Patrico or Petrico. My pātai for this session, education and informing is an important part of this mahi. What opportunities are there popping up in your guys' worlds that you see that are being used so people know about things like growing, harvesting, what nutrition means, soil organism knowledge, etc. Also a comment in there around if people's exposure is just to high processed food from the supermarket, then how that relationship to what kai is from the whenua could be at a distance. Just before I'll give you a second to ruminate on that, just conscious as well, finally we've got about 10 minutes left in our call, so we'll be wrapping up soon. I really just touch back on the point of Pounamu around that political, that philosophical will. One of my whānau members is a pricing analyst for one of the big kai exporters here in Aotearoa. And they said to me, guess how many days it takes for all the farmers in Aotearoa to provide all the dairy requirements for Aotearoa for a year? How many days in a calendar year? And I was like, maybe 3 months, maybe 2 months, maybe 4 months. That's kind of where my answers were. And they said to me, 15 days. Farmers' total production for all the kai, for all the cheese, milk, all the milk powder, everything, all the yogurt, all that kind of stuff produced here in Aotearoa. 15 days could feed everyone for all their dairy needs. And so at that point, you have to ask questions around, if it's that possible, if it only takes that amount of time, then that other, as Sonya was talking to, that other allocation of that 95, or closer to 99, I imagine, at least from the 15 days kōrero, allocation of that kai for profit speaks to the mindset that we're currently operating from, which we're hearing, and you'll know yourselves, as people are saying in the chat, isn't a sustainable long-term one. So there's a question around education, and then another question is, speaking about that mindset shift that's possibly required, whether it's in funders, whether it's in individuals themselves, do you have any experiences you can point to where you go, when people engage in this, I've seen their minds change, when they're or whatever it might be. So there's 2 questions there around education opportunities, and also where have you seen these shifts take place, if at all?
Yeah, kia ora. Great questions. Firstly, education. There's opportunity, especially in each community. So depending on where you live, to access philanthropic pūtea to run gardening programs. So that's mainly how I get paid these days, is to run programs. It's really needed because you empower people with knowledge, then they can help themselves. That's the movement of motuhake. So people can be self-reliant. And actually what I've found, so one of the outcomes of growing food is that it's a really healing mechanism, because we're diving in, we're having a relationship with Rongo mātāne, our deity, our atua, which is all about peacefulness. And so people will arrive fairly anxious and busy and overwhelmed, and then they will leave after spending, as little as 40 minutes in the māra. Something very profound happens to people when they spend time connected to soil. So not only is it hitting, are you saving money by growing food, but you're helping reset your hininaru and your emotional state. And you're getting some physical exercise because you're bending and lifting, and so you're breathing deeper. So it has this whole holistic well-being element to it as well. Yeah. So pursue, if you're looking for money, just go ask. There's people that have got philanthropic money that want to do good projects. And remembering there's a whole other aspect to actually growing food, not just the food, but what it does to the person growing.
Any kōrero from yourself, Sonya? Oh, you're muted. Apologies.
Where am I? Not especially. I mean, I think what's really awesome about the Salvation Army is, we've got about 70 odd food banks, as I said earlier, and all around the motu we've got our centres are doing things like working with whānau around cooking kai, growing kai. Even I've actually found the social supermarkets, or choice model food banks as we tend to call them. It's quite amazing actually, what our kaimahi are talking about in terms of the opportunities that they find through those, in terms of supporting people, in terms of, for example, use of meal kits, or, learning about sort of budgeting and things like that, in terms of, building capability and strengthening sort of nutrition and skills like that.
Tēnā koe, Sonya. Trish, any questions for our speakers from yourself?
For them and their wisdom and all the wealth that they have to offer in this space, in quite diverse ways as well. I think that's kind of like, it's quite a jump sometimes, jumping from Pounamu's gardening space and deep in the soil through to thinking about how does cooking classes work over here. I think it's really rich and quite challenging, but it makes me feel very hopeful at the same time. I think we're really close to the end, and we probably are at the time when we need to start thinking about wrapping it up. I know there are a couple of questions in the chat that kind of have been bubbling along we haven't got to. We apologise for that. There's some real wisdom. Some of you have shared your stuff in the chat, your websites, your resources. We'll do our best to kind of collate some of that, check that out and send that out. That is really wonderful. Just a moment to kind of touch back to where we were at the beginning of this webinar, and that exercise of inviting you to find yourself as a manu flying across the landscape, across Aotearoa, and seeing and experiencing what Kai Motuhake or food security might look like in those places, the sounds, the tastes, the smells, the feel of it, both in our hands and within our bodies and our emotions. just to connect back to that and that beautiful vision, and really to mihi to each of you for holding that sense of abundance and connection that comes in those spaces. A huge mihi to both Pounamu and Sonya for being in this space and sharing your wisdom. A huge mihi also to Steve, who had prepared himself for this room and hasn't had the opportunity to be with us and share. He's been texting me backwards and forwards for most of this time, and he feels bereft. He feels kind of aggrieved that he hasn't been able to be with us and share in this richness. And lastly, a huge mihi to you, Trent. Thank you for being my partner in crime. Thank you for your curiosity and for your care of us, and for the way that you help us navigate these spaces. We're going to put up a little wee slide just to show you what's coming up for us here at Kore Hiakai. We have more webinars coming across the winter, and we have, for those of you in Wellington, we have a evening event coming up in early July called Kai and Kōrero. Chance again to hear and listen to some amazing people, but also a wonderful opportunity to have some really yummy food from a place called Gray's Wine Bar, where they do sustainable food within the context of using everything that comes in, a no waste moment. They're a bit of legends in Wellington. So if you're in Wellington or can find yourself getting to Wellington for the 1st of July, that might be something that you want to join in with. Our next webinar is on Thursday the 31st of July, where we get to explore some of the kai strategies that exist across the motu, called Our Kai, Our Way. So yeah, I pass it back to you, Trent, to take us out and close us off.
Tēnā koe, just tēnā tātou. Again, from all of us, please, thank you, appreciate your time. Kōrua, Pounamu, ko Sonya. I think a mihi to the years that have gone into the moment we've had with you, all the unseen work, or the late nights, or the fire Pounamu, if I'm thinking of you, or the picking slugs out of your gardens, like my least favourite job. All that unseen mahi that goes towards creating the experiences you've had that you've shared with us. Appreciate all of that. And those that have supported yourselves, and obviously whakaaro atu ki a Steve. Zoom's a cruel tool sometimes. Koutou katoa, the hope is that you arrived well, but also the hope is still that you leave well, go into your own lives and where you're walking this journey already with something from here. Look to the follow-ups that we've got prepared in terms of the email access to this webinar online and things. Those will all be provided. So look for the comms in the coming days around that. But appreciate your time. Appreciate your energy. Really appreciate the questions and comments in the chat. So mihi atu ki a koutou te hunga whakarongo. Ka whakakapi ki te karakia, ka tai ka oti tō tātou kōrero mo te ahi nei. Me karakia tātou katoa. Tēnā ka puia ngā whenua o te kōrero kia taihuake kia waihuake. Kia tikina noa te wā tika kia raranga kia tuitui te iu tangata ki te ihi atu te rewhiti whakamaua kia tīna. Haumi e hui e. Ka kite everybody.